2019 Mazda MX-5 Miata first drive review, more power is the icing on top. San Diego, when Mazda announced that the 2019 Mazda MX-5 Miata was getting a serious increase in power, I was both excited and nervous. I was excited because more power is always exciting, and it was no insubstantial increase. At 181 horsepower, it's the most powerful production Miata ever offered, beating out turbocharged Mazdaspeed Miata's 178 horsepower. Plus it has more revs to play with. But what had me worried was whether this power would mess up the friendly, playful character of the Miata. The 155 horsepower 2.0-liter engine is just about perfect, almost universally loved by the Autoblog staff and other reviewers, with good mid-range torque and short gearing that always made it feel quick in nearly every rev range. It felt like the right amount of power for the chassis, too. There was just enough to get it loose without working too hard, but it wouldn't spin you around unexpectedly. I could imagine a couple of ways the new engine could affect that sweet balance, too. A bit too much power could risk some of the Miata's accessibility and predictability. It might become more serious and less fun-loving. I also feared that in pursuit of a higher redline and more horsepower, the low end of the rev range might become painfully slow. Honda owners know this feeling whenever their tech-equipped screamers drop out of the aggressive camp profile, and the Toyota 86 and BRZ suffer from an awful lack of torque right in the mid-range that doesn't recover until nearly redline. All of this was on my mind when the assembled reviewers were briefed by Mazda engineers about the car. It started out like most presentations, with a brief rundown of the goals of the car and what Mazda has done with the model so far. Then came a chart showing the power curves of the NC, current ND, and the 2019 model, and my fear of a loss of low-end grunt dissipated. The amount of power and torque over engine speed is nearly identical between the old and new ND Miatas, right up to around 4,500 revolutions per minute. And then from there, the 2019 continues making more power all the way to its 181 horse peak at 7,000 revolutions per minute. 500 revolutions per minute higher than the previous model's redline. This was a good sign. Mazda managed to get these gains with no sacrifices through many small upgrades. The throttle body is wider with a slimmer throttle plate, the intake manifold has longer runners and dual paths, and the intake ports are larger. The exhaust valves, ports and header pipes are bigger, and the exhaust cam has a bit more duration and lift. The pistons were redesigned with slimmer skirts for less friction and new tops for better cooling. The rods have stronger, shorter end bolts for less weight, and the crank is stiffer. Finally, the fuel injectors run higher pressure for better fuel atomization. Mazda also sought greater refinement, adding a dual-mass flywheel to help with transmission noise and vibration, adjusting the electronic throttle to flutter a bit to eliminate vibration from the engine rocking under power, and tweaking the muffler for a smoother sound. All the presentation slides and engineering talk is fine, but the true test is actually driving the car. Over the course of 2 days, I drove freeways and mountain roads between San Diego and Pismo Beach, racking up hundreds of miles between a Miata RF Club and soft-top Miata Grand Touring. And what I learned is that I really shouldn't have worried, and heck, with Mazda's nearly 30-year track record of fun Miatas, I really shouldn't have worried. The 2019 Miata is basically the current car, but with an extra little layer of icing. And that icing is delicious, almost too delicious. Let's start with the engine, which manages to feel just like a current Miata when hustling it around town. It's got enough grunt to feel peppy in town, and it isn't so fast that you'll be cursing every speed limit sign you pass. When surface streets give way to a highway on-ramp is the time you'll first notice the extra power and revs, and you'll notice the revs more than the power, since the car is able to hold each gear a little longer to savor the little engine's furious growl for a few moments more. The power, though, is much more subtle. It's not like the hit from the turbocharger or even the cam profile change in some tech engine. It basically continues the current Miata's smooth power past the old rev limit of 6,500 to the new one of 7,200. It feels just like the old car, but it just keeps pulling for longer. Then on back roads, the muted bass of the intake and the higher snarl of the exhaust combine with the power to encourage you to keep the engine as close to redline as possible. And it's easy to do so between the car's laser-precise, slick as a light switch shifter and the engine's willingness to build revs.